Affirmative House thanks all of you and feels privileged to stand on the side of the importance social media has in democracy. To open the debate, the Affirmative House feels the need to explain a few terms. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines social media as forms of electronic communication through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content. Democracy is defined as a belief in freedom and equality between people, or a system of government based on this belief, in which power is either held by elected representatives or directly by the people themselves. According to Investopedia, social media facilitates sharing ideas, thoughts, and information through the building of virtual networks and communities. With the connection to these communities, we are able to provide the people in the communities with necessary information pertaining to the systems of government. We affirm that social media is beneficial to democracy. In 2019, it is often normal for social media to be the only outlet people use to get this information, where in past times we would use news outlets or on television or the newspaper. It is impossible to take away everyone in the world's access to social media, as well as completely unnecessary. In the article, Silicon Valley Can't Destroy Democracy Without Our Help, Parker states that social media may be only as harmful as we allow it to be. We must use advances in technology to our benefit and provide everyone with correct and beneficial information. Whether it's newspapers, television, Facebook, YouTube, or Google searches, someone is pulling the strings, lobbying their own agendas because there are no consequences, said Safko in the article, More Americans Are Getting Their News from Social Media. Here's the top 3 reasons social media is good for democracy. The information is free. Everyone has a device to access the internet. If they don't, public libraries do. An article by Forbes listed the top free legitimate online news sources, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, BBC, and several more. Access to comments from other citizens is the next one. When reading a newspaper, you get information, sometimes days later in comparison to online, and you don't get to read feedback from others. The third one is social media platforms help us alert one another to a million different problems we would not be aware of. Social media is a tool that widens space for democracy. For example, when proving the benefits of social media towards democracy, we can set China as an example. The people in China have a greater chance of being heard than without having social media. Emily Parker, a digital diplomacy advisor, author of Now I Know Who My Comrades Are, Voices from the Internet Underground, and member of President Clinton's policy plan for the State Department official, and the founder of Code for Country, which is composed of Russian and American programmers who solved issues of government transparency. Parker, in a recent debate, intelligence debates, was for the motion that social media is good for democracy. On her side of the debate, she stated, from Black Lives Matter and the Women's March to local and national political campaigns, social media is the driving force behind political organizing today, and thus serves as a buttress for modern democracy. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube democratize information by allowing all citizens an unprecedented opportunity to have their voices heard and to hold the powerful accountable, free from censorship by government or traditional media gatekeepers. Propaganda, bullying, and harassment are hardly new phenomenons and are not unique to social media. These platforms should not be maligned for the bad behavior of some users. Based on her first-hand experience with these issues being discussed, she should of course understand that there are downsides to it, but that does not conclude that it is not necessary or important for democracy. Democracy reporting states that democratic institutions need some public trust and support in order to be effective. It is easy to say that information online is incorrect, but not every single thing is a lie, and there is often proof of that. If you take the information you are given, it is easily studied where you can prove that it is in fact legitimate. Cassis Stein explained in an article, Is Social Media Good or Bad for Democracy?, that if you live in an information cocoon, you will believe many things that are false, and you will fail to learn countless things that are true. That's awful for democracy. On the other hand, if you read all the information thoroughly and make sure you understand it and aren't spreading fake news on social media profiles, this ability to share information is possibly what dreams are made of for those involved in government. Thus, we urge acknowledgement of how crucial social media truly is for democracy.
speaker number one.
According to the $10 founding father without a father, Alexander Hamilton, it has been observed that pure democracy, if it were practical, would be the most perfect government. Experience has proved that no position is more false than this. That ancient democracies in which the people themselves deliberated never possessed one good feature of government. Their very character was tyranny, their figure deformity. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judge, and our worthy opponents, E.J., Haley, and Sarah, we, the negative, deny the definition of the affirmative provided for democracy, and the negative would like to define the following terms. Democracy, necessary, fake news, credibility, and polarization. Merriam-Webster defines democracy as a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. Merriam-Webster also defines necessary as absolutely needed or required, and of an inevitable nature or inescapable. Merriam-Webster also defines polarization as a division of two opposites and the concentration about opposing extremes of groups or interests formally ranged on a continuum. They continue to define polarization as news that frequently used to describe a political story which is damaging to agency, entity, and person. However, it is by no means restricted to politics and seems to have currency in terms of general news. Merriam-Webster defines credibility as the quality or power of inspiring to believe. To begin, I would like to look back at the idea of democracy, which is usually associated with the ancient Greek and Roman societies. It's referred to as the beginning of Westernized civilization. Democracy has been enacting political systems successfully for some time. This is all before the invention of social media. If you refer to our definition necessary, you will find that social media was not absolutely needed nor required, nor was it of inevitable nature or inescapable. America is one of the oldest, most successful democracies in the history of mankind, and we find that due to its success, in the United States specifically, social media is not necessary for democracy. Thus, the negative will focus on the polarization and distrust the media. This creates in the media and the problems with democracy. Social media brings about change in a positive way, including organizations of popular social movements such as the Women's March, Black Lives Matter, and the #MeToo movement. That being said, social movements like the women's suffrage movement, civil rights movement, bus boycotts, Vietnam protests were all organized prior to the existence of social media. This also comes with an amount of polarization of the online community and general distrust in the media. When you get on Twitter or Facebook, you only see what you follow. You only intake the media and the content you choose to engage with, and this is a problem because it creates the effect of an echo chamber. This is like-minded people grouping together and validating their own opinions by the way of groups of solidarity. This is a hive mind mentality where there is no room for discussion or dissection and only allows for the same ideas to be shared, sometimes even being fake news. This leads to fear of backlash. The social movement #MeToo thrived online and led to be a success in bringing attention to an issue not being spoken about. But this is not because of an echo chamber, it's because the hashtag created a safe space. A safe space would be a place being where you were able to trust people and be open about other personal issues without fear of harassment or judgment. This polarization can be less mental and more systematic. Many online publications will create outrageous titles and create fake news to bring traffic to their website to get money from advertisers. This incentivizing the media to exaggerate the truth this is incentivizing the media to lie and exaggerate the truth to intrigue the viewer, which makes us question what is really credible.
Time. Alright, now we have the crossfire between the first two speakers.
Do you think that it's the user's responsibility to fact check everything that they hear or read?
Yes, because you can't just read things, like they always say, you can't just read things and expect it to be true. So it's necessary to fact check it, because there's some things that are credible because you can see the sources and read like who has wrote it and you know that it's credible, but other times it's not gonna be true.
What is defined as credible?
Most of the time you can go and read an article or something that someone has said on social media, and you can go to the bottom and see like the references they used and stuff like that, or they'll take direct quotes from those people and put it in there.
Could older or newer social media users use the tools available to them to verify these claims?
I think everyone can use the tools that are available, and like for me personally, I have like family members who will ask for help to look up things, so it just seems easy that way for like because they can ask the younger people if they're like older and they don't understand it. So.
Do you think that democracy or do you think that social media is a necessity?
Social media
Just generally
isn't,
speaking.
it just generally, it's not a necessity, like you don't need it in everyday life to survive, but it's
What would
here
you
and
think
it's
a
gonna
necessity
stay
would be?
here. A necessity is like clothes, food, water.
Do you think
Shelter.
what do you think that a necessity to democracy would be?
A necessity to democracy would probably be just like things that,
Not social media?
social media is necessary to democracy in 2019.
What
Time.
about
And we have our second affirmative speaker.
Begin.
Oh, that's me.
Mhm.
Although the negative house would try to ambush the audience to correlate social media with fake news, credible sources state the opposite. Newspapers and other sources that, apart from technology, will never be as fast as social media is to reach the audience in an instant. My debating team stated, democracy through the people by representation. An article examines Facebook's latest actions from their third quarter reporting that shows that they're taking action after deleting fake and false news, also harming content that is related to drugs, firearm sales, and child pornography, all which would manipulate users in the democratic process. This shows that social media platforms do go the extra mile and take a form of responsibility in ensuring their platforms can be used safely by its users. That is to counter the claims of fake news. Alright. Social media aids democracy in being a free platform that offers information to its users. 55% of adults in the United States get their news from social media. According to Forbes magazine, the New Research Center reports 55% of US adults now get their news from social media either often or sometimes. an 8% increase from last year. The statement above proves that many adults have social media be the source of the information they get. If social media was not used, these 55% of adults, whom are a majority, would be left with one less platform to find instant information and news. Many users of social media use it as a source to get news in Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit, almost 73% of them. According to a Pew study, Facebook, along with Twitter and Reddit, also stood out as the sites that had the highest proportion of respective users seeking news. Almost 3/4 of users of the social network use it as a way to get news, compared to 71% of Twitter and 62% of Reddit users, the Pew study found. If people have adopted social media to better increase their involvement in democracy, whether that looks like using it as an information source or to use it to share their voice, it will be anti-democratic to take this away from them. Even political campaigns are relying on social media to increase the widespread of their ideals and inform people about them. According to The Hill, the 2020 Democratic presidential primary is being waged across a wide set of social media platforms, ranging from Ask Me Anything discussions to live streaming. Even includes heavy reliance on more traditional platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. In today's world of increasingly young and diverse people, this means that if social media is being used to benefit the users and to inform them about the new political shifts that are coming, we can see how social media benefits democracy by it being used by political leaders and the people of America. Bringing more people into the political process is a strategy implemented through social media by political campaigns. Of the 2020 candidates, Senator Bernie Sanders has been among the most adept users of social media, hosting several Ask Me Anything question and answer sessions on Reddit and a discussion platform that hosts conversations on anything from the latest tech gadget to 2020 politics, and one that skews towards males and younger. His campaign also has a channel on Twitch, a live streaming platform often used by gamers and owned by Amazon. Sanders used the platform to interact with users a day before a major speech on Medicare for All on Wednesday. What we try to do on every platform is to reach out to people, and especially people who may not otherwise be interested in politics, he told The Hill. All of this comes from Bernie, Miller Lewis added. Throughout his career, he's been really interested in engaging people in the political process through new technology and media. Reaching out to people who usually do not make use of their right to have democracy because they are not exposed enough to democracy makes a point that social media is most definitely of huge importance towards democracy.
Second speaker, Media.
Larry Diamond is an American political sociologist and professor of sociology and political science at Stanford University. He suggests that there are 4 basic elements of democracy. The first being it's a system for choosing and replacing government through free and fair elections. The second being active participation of people as citizens in politics and civic life, the protection of human rights of all citizens, and a rule of law in which laws and procedures apply equally to all citizens. One of the most important principles outlined by these 4 is the active participation of people as citizens in politics and civil life. Social media is a tool. It does benefit democracy. It's a platform that creates a two-way conversation stream according to the Public Relations Society of America. But social media on its own cannot create changes in government or start revolutions. In this new digital age, we see less and less action being taken because of the convenience that social media offers. Within seconds, I can show my support for like a hurricane or any other or a social movement with a simple hashtag and move on with my day. Charlotte Robinson is an account manager for the Octagon Agency. She describes the issues with hashtag activism in an article by Buzzsaw. She says social media can be used as a forum to promote ideology and begin conversation. However, it is unacceptable not to move past the point of conversation into action. With action comes action, and what social media does is help to facilitate those conversations that need to be facilitated in order for action to occur. Political action has always historically revolved around voting, marching, public speaking, protests, physical petitions, strikes, and debates like the one we're having right now. These forms of activism have been determining factors in policy changes and shifts in political culture for decades. I want to talk about two very important and successful social movements, one being on social media. The Black Lives Matter movement is a social movement that took social media by storm. It was co-founded by Alicia Garza, an American activist. She started the viral hashtag Turn Movement following the acquittal of George Zimmerman. According to the Black Lives Matter website, the movement is a globally recognized organizing project that focuses on combating anti-Black state-sanctioned violence and the oppression of all Black people. The movement is a significant political protest. It fights systemic racism and oppression. Alicia Garza, in an interview with Yes Magazine, spoke about the early beginnings of the movement. When we began hashtag Black Lives Matter, it was a series of social media platforms that connected people online to take action together offline. Liz Pleasant, the writer of the article, goes on to say, Black Lives Matter has inspired important in-person gatherings and conversations around race. This important movement has created conversations online, but it has also promoted action to be taken offline. Social media is a tool that can be good for democracy, but it isn't necessary. Years ago, before the rise of the internet and technology, a Black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus for a white man, and she was arrested. News of this arrest motivated boycotts, protests all around the United States. Of course, I'm talking about the civil rights movement. Many policy changes came about from the advocacy displayed during this time, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Both of these movements allowed for important conversations about race and the mistreatment of Black citizens in America, but they also promoted the necessary protests that needed to happen to occur. They are significant movements that highlight huge issues that America is still struggling with today. But the distinction in all of this that I would like to draw attention to is the involvement of social media. Social media is a great tool. For the Black Lives Matter movement, it was a tool that was used to organize and connect people. That's its purpose. But the movement took place offline. The hashtag motivated action, and democracy can only happen in the real world. Something else I would like to bring up is that the affirmative makes a lot of points about social media being good for democracy, which I personally agree with. It is a tool that widens the space for democracy. But this debate is not whether the platform is good or bad, but rather if it's necessary for democracy. The affirmative also brought up a point that I would like to address. We, the negative, do not plan on removing social media. I find it entertaining myself. I love my Instagram and Twitter. But rather, we want to make a point that it is not necessary for democracy to occur, and that can be proven through the history of America.
How did the crossfire between second speakers?
Okay, a point that was brought up is about news and how people get their news. Do you think that a slower news cycle can increase credibility because it encourages more time to research the facts?
Could you repeat the question?
Do you think a slower news cycle can increase credibility because it encourages more time to look up the facts and do your research?
A slower news cycle does not guarantee credibility just because, for example, you mentioned the Black Lives Matter campaign, and you said that there were hashtags on social media, right? And so when the movement was made on social media, are you it cannot, because what you need to do is to fact check it to see the sources and access whether they're credible or not.
One of the four basic elements that I pointed out for a democracy is a system for choosing and replacing government through free and fair elections. Do y'all agree with that? I think I heard something about representatives in the first speech. That you get to choose people with free and fair elections.
Right.
Okay, so you think social media is free, correct? I think we all agree.
It is, yes.
Do you think it's fair?
Social media is fair?
Yeah.
Is that the argument?
No, I'm asking, do you think it's fair?
It depends on what is like from what perspective? Because you can't just generalize that is social media fair.
Yeah. So would you
What
trust,
options?
would you trust an entire presidential election that was held on social media?
The question here is not about elections, it's about the democracy as a whole.
Yeah,
So supporting the democracy, there are also other parts of the democracy other than
Yeah.
the election.
including civic life and voting in
Exactly.
elections, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Time. Okay, affirmative third speaker.
The affirmative House has stated many points backed up by credible evidence to convey the reasons why social media brings so many benefits and is crucial for democracy in a digital age as the one we live in. This House has never tried to prove that social media brings the best out of people, nor that every purpose of social media is beneficial, as the negative House has tried to argue in some of their points. But we have backed up the resolution that in our age we cannot ignore that social media is necessary for democracy, especially in countries that have such a heavy use of technology, such as America. According to the opposite side, social media has different uses that differ from only being used for democracy. The affirmative House has never claimed that the only use of social media was to bring news or that it has an exclusive use for democracy. Credibility is defined as something that you are able to believe. If you can believe from newspapers because the sources have been proven to be reliable, you can also believe the things that social media stands for. And that's what the affirmative House stands for. The opposing team also tried to oppose the affirmative House by saying that social media is not necessary and it is not an absolute need for people to live. Obviously, social media was not used back in the day because it was not invented, nor did we have the technology as a tool as we have it now. Yet, if what the opposing House is standing for is that social media is not a necessity, the argument would also be saying that since it's just not a necessity for living, democracy is also not a necessity for living because people can live without democracy, which would therefore make this whole debate pointless because that's not what we're arguing about in the first place. We're arguing whether it's crucial or not for democracy, not if it's a necessity for living. This statement makes little sense as well, as we all know that technology has already been invented. If as stated by the opposing team, the movement of Black Lives Matter had not had the social media to back it up, it would have not been created as fast, nor its impact would have been as large and as fast as it was. The hashtag did create action, and social media is still the real world. It's still real people, and it's not a fantasy world. In a digitalized age such as ours, we cannot go back in the times and pretend that technological advancement has not been created. The affirmative House has carefully searched all the sources that back up all of those statements and made sure that they're credible. Some of those sources include political leaders themselves, Pew Studies, reputable newspapers, and even social media experts themselves who have worked for former presidents in the past. Using social media for the purpose of democracy is only a click away from us. Social media makes our world more democratic. Social media is available 24 hours a day, every day of the week. It is free of cost. Its users are updated with news instantly as things happen. Voters are informed. Political parties can advertise and engage new people, such as Bernie Sanders, who makes a huge use of digital campaigns. And he makes discussions such as the Ask Me Anything discussion, and he makes live streams for candidates where people can actually engage live with him for democracy. Of course, we can see a clear example also of our current president, Donald Trump, and his use of Twitter. For better or for worse, the information that he chooses to share with the world through social media makes an impact on the audience and allows them to make a choice based on whether or not the information that they see has an impact on how they would vote or not, which therefore aids democracy. There are tools that people create to make target audiences, which allows them to engage with similar people, and they even have ways to create feedback that they can receive. People who would otherwise feel lonely can connect with like-minded individuals and create a movement when the involvement increases. As Frederick von Schiller would say, even the weak become strong when they are united. Many movements come from social media hashtags and rapidly increase as more people feel identified with other people they would have most likely not feel identified, as we have talked about the Black Lives Matter. Adults and youth also use social media as means of getting their news, as we have talked about, and it creates a space where they can participate in democracy in their own country, which would obviously start with being informed about what they have to know or not know, to vote or not vote. We can see that newspapers such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, BBC, and several more are available in stores, and they are also available for free at the reach of people's hands through social media, because they have accounts on all of those platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, amongst others. For all of these reasons, the Affirmative House has stated on the side that the use of social media in a day that's so digitalized is absolutely
Time.
necessary.
Alright, negative third speaker.
I would like to clarify that the negative's use of the word necessary had very little to do with livelihoods and whatnot. We're speaking of 4,000 years of democracy that has existed completely free of social media, going all the way back to Plato and Socrates, who both had very strong opinions about the control of people in democracy. For instance, the founders of the United States Republic and the Grecian Republic both agreed that people should not be allowed to directly voice their opinions, so that they would not go. They didn't want to not represent people. They wanted to protect them from being a part of a mob with a misguided purpose. Have you been on TikTok? Maybe you've seen social media pictures. How many can you think of that have no editing, that don't have a filter on them? How many pictures on a famous model's social media are unedited? So your claim that social media is not fantasy, that it is real, must be taken with a grain of salt when everything on social media has to be edited and thought of for the direct purpose of selling a product, that product being the user's social media account. You want to gain followers, you want to gain likes, and putting out normal, boring information and putting out normal, real facts and stories and opinions isn't the best way to drive that. So we can say that social media not just can be used for bad, but that procedurally, unless people who have bad intent are kept completely off of social media, they will and can and have made it a platform for their opinion. For instance, YouGov, in a survey of about 8,000 adults, found that about 2%, that's about 160 of them, reported that they believe resolutely that the earth is flat. The YouGov also found in this survey that this is twice as likely to be the truth among millennials that get all of their news from social media. This is because millennials, like many people who, as you said, identify with people they wouldn't have previously identified with, are that, trust them and believe them. And the way that social media works, and the way that groups work, the way that mob mentality and bandwagoning works, is that if you trust and interact with members of a group, you're more likely to take that position. In a good way, if people trust and interact with members of the #MeToo movement, they're more likely to speak about their own experiences. In a more moderate way, if people trust and interact with NRA members, they're more likely to support relaxed gun laws. And of course, as I said, if people trust and interact with Flat Earth Society, they're more likely to believe that there's a flat Earth. And that credible evidence to the contrary isn't as credible because they don't trust that evidence as much as they trust the people in their group. Once an individual identifies with a group of people, they're much more likely to take on that group's viewpoints. You have talked about the power of social media is within population size, that social media can reach anybody and everybody, but that is always going to cause issues for people who are uninformed because most people are, in some level, uninformed. We consider that the human mind can only be up to 95% accurate for a memory from a couple seconds ago. What about reporting something from earlier in the day? We have tons of stories about Reddit misidentifying shooters and doxing people who have their lives ruined. And, well, in the Me Too movement, we've also had some false allegations there and had many people had their lives ruined as a 1 in 100 chance. But even then, those 1 in 100 people are having their lives engaged upon by a hostile audience that does not listen to any other opinion than those by the people that they trust in the group that they work with. People have the power to select what they see online and will therefore always limit their selections to what they deem to fit within their identity. This is because social media was never intended for news, it was never intended for information. It was intended for personal identification, personality, and opinion. It is not made for the spread of information, so it can never perfectly spread information. As you said, you wouldn't trust the election for a democratic position to social media, so how can you say that social media is necessary for democracy if you won't even let the two interact? Finally, I would like to talk about the money, because I do find that money is the best place to find it, and AdSense is driven upon the ad, a single click, meaning that clickbait is absolutely necessary in order to make money online as a influencer or a news site.
I will do the grand crossfire between all members. Begin.
There was a point brought up about the restrictions put on social media that help restrictions on things that get in the way of the democratic process. I wanted to ask, how is that unique to social media, and how does that reflect its necessity for democracy? Because those are things we see in real life, like you can't have child porn in real life, you can't do certain hate speech in real life. So I wanted to see, like, how is that unique to social media?
Right, well, the affirmative has never said it was unique to social media, we just said it's one of the concerns the negative house seem to have, that it's not true whatever you see on social media. That's why we have to talk about the restraints they're taking to make credible sources from social media. But the earth is flat. None of us believe the earth is flat, but we all use social media. I'm sure that none of you believe the earth is flat. So that does not mean, I just don't think that has anything to do with democracy. I just don't see how it's correlated to it. And yeah, you can
Is there a question in there?
you can still Google whatever you want, right? Does someone restrain you
Yes,
from what you Google?
You can Google whatever you want, yeah.
So could we not Google something from the opposing views that you have?
It's true. How many people do you think do that?
That's
I
not the
guarantee you
question,
very
though.
little.
The question is, can you
I
do it
asked the
or
question
not?
to you. I answered that question. I do believe people can Google things.
Well, I would have to go
And I
back
asked you a
to
question,
studies
how many
to
people do
see
you
how many
think
people do
actually
that.
search?
But that's the same thing that you would see in newspapers. You will choose the one that goes more with your views, right? So that's not really a restraint for democracy, is it?
Suppose not.
I have a question. For, in one of your speeches, you talked about, action equals action, something like that. And you talked about how, social media was used as a tool to actually facilitate a movement. And so, if social media was used to facilitate the movement, is it not necessary for a democracy then?
I don't think so, because we have other movements, like the women's suffrage movement, I don't know, but there's a bunch. There's the women's suffrage movement, there's the civil rights movement that happened before even social media came about. We did concede that social media is great for connecting and organizing people, but we're saying that those things that they organize, the protests that happen, and that the petitions that happen, that's democracy, and that happens outside of social media. Social media is great for getting people together that have like-minded views, like you said, and creating communities, but those communities have to act in order to get change.
And I wanted to touch on something you said earlier before I ran out of time. You said that people identify with people that they wouldn't have identified with. Do you not concede that that means that people are likely to lose their opinions that they would have had?
No.
Time. Alright,
Because I don't think the
affirmative
Earth's
speaker.
flat, but I might. You don't know.
The affirmative house wants to thank the amazing juror and the incredible audience and the opposing team once more for giving us some of their precious time and participating in such an excellent debate, where the affirmative side was able to present ideas and information regarding the importance that social media has regarding democracy, and to prove the importance it has nowadays in countries that claim to be democratic, and even to increase democracy in those countries that do not have any democracy by giving a voice to the people. Let's remember the words of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who said, "Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power over us. The ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president and senators and congressmen and government officials, but the voters of this country." As stated from the first speech, political campaigns have used social media to increase the involvement of people. If we want people to be involved in democracy, to have knowledge of what is happening in the current world, and to participate in movements, we need to make sure that we are informing them and allowing them to create a response back. As Horace Mann would say, education is our only political safety. Outside of this arc, all is deluge. The Affirmative House proposes educating people through social media about what is happening instantaneously, all the while educating them about how to make a responsible use of social media that allows them to take advantage of all the democratic benefits it offers to its users. We feel that we have won this argument because of several reasons. Our sources were stronger because the authors of the sources were more credible. They had a strong audience that viewed and backed them up, and altogether they were more scholarly than a blog post about someone who isn't by someone who isn't credible. Our sources were more reputable. We were able to back them up and include studies where social media is beneficial to democracy. For example, when our team mentioned the statistics of social media, we had exact numbers from a legitimate source. Our points were more realistic in comparison to the negative side, where they have claimed social media isn't necessary. At this point, we can confirm social media is not going anywhere, so use it to your benefit. Just because things worked in the past doesn't mean they can't improve. Their sources weren't good quality compared to ours, and they were unable to provide legitimate backing to their claims. They often ignored or went around questions we asked. Social media may not have been made for news, but the news is now on social media, so why not use what you have to your benefit?
Alright, we ready for speaker? The negative would also like to thank everyone for coming out to the debate today. I would like to remind our opponents and judge that the resolution today is whether social media is necessary for democracy. Whether social media is good for democracy or not, it does not prove its necessity. The negative does not deny that social media can be a great tool for democracy. Social media does offer a way for the world to stay connected, as well as create a platform for speedy spread of information. Social media can bring a change in positive ways, but it also can't. It does have its benefits, it also comes with drawbacks, including polarization and distrust in the media. The negative focused on polarization and distrust in the media and how they create problems within democracy. The United States has a democratic history expanning over 200 years. With the introduction of our first chat rooms in less than 32 years ago and the first social media site in less than 23, we can conclude that social media is not what makes democracy work. We believe that because of the history and success of the United States, social media is not necessary for democracy. We believe we won today because we touched on things most would not. We discussed the history of democracy before social media and therefore proved social media is not necessary for democracy. The affirmative did a great job with outlining benefits that social media offers to democracy. But overall, we have managed to have a successful democracy without social media, and we believe that we can still continue.
I'm like still shaking.
I know, you like the feeling in the room.
Yeah, like nobody's breathing, breathe.
Cut your attention with a knife.
I'm just hungry.
No.
About to get
I want to sit down so bad.
I should have brought 30.
Good. I'm gonna tweet about it.
Yeah, the timer has.
Keep that going.
would have been me to do
Yeah,
that.
because we were smiling in the
He
team.
didn't have no followers on Instagram anyway, but she did it, so.
We made it through, yay.
The original way I wrote one of those was like, how many pictures do you have on your social media that hadn't gone through Photoshop? We done?
Yeah, just one second. Okay.
Everyone knows it.
Based on arguments made and proficiency of language and the way that it flowed and ideas coming out, I would select the negative as the winner.
Boo. I'm just kidding.
You guys are much closer than we were hoping.